The cartographer's discovery Vareth Cole had spent 43 cycles mapping the galaxy, and in all that time, he had never encountered a blank space quite like this one. The holographic display before him showed the spiraling arms of the Andromeda sector in brilliant detail, each star system catalogued with precision, each planetary body documented down to its atmospheric composition. But there, occupying roughly 18,000 cubic light-years of space, sat an empty gray zone marked only with the words, Human Territorial Sovereignty, Mapping Restricted. The Universal Mapping Consortium prided itself on maintaining the most comprehensive galactic database in known space. Over 12,000 years of continuous operation had produced charts so detailed that a ship could navigate from one edge of civilized space to another without ever encountering an unmapped anomaly.
Yet this void existed at the very heart of their work.
A deliberate absence that gnawed at Vareth's methodical mind. He pulled up the historical records, his six-fingered hands dancing across the interface with practiced ease. His species, the Korathi, were natural archivists, possessing memory glands that allowed them to retain vast amounts of information with perfect clarity. This genetic gift had made them indispensable to the galactic community's record-keeping institutions. What Vareth discovered in the archives troubled him deeply. 153 years ago, the last official mapping expedition had entered human space. The vessel, the Stellar Chronicler, had carried a crew of 22 specialists from 7 different species. It returned after 6 months with only 14 crew members. The others were listed as lost to navigational hazards. The survivors refused to speak about what they had witnessed, and within a year, all of them had retired from active service. Most had retreated to remote colonies and severed contact with their former colleagues. Vareth dug deeper. Before the Stellar Chronicler, there had been 11 other attempts to map human territory. 3 vessels had vanished entirely, their distress beacons falling silent within days of crossing the boundary. 5 had returned early, reporting catastrophic system failures that made continued surveying impossible. The remaining 3 had completed partial surveys, but their data was listed as corrupted beyond recovery in the official records. What struck Vareth as particularly odd was the pattern. The mapping failures had begun approximately 190 years ago, coinciding almost exactly with humanity's emergence as a spacefaring civilization. Before that, the region had been surveyed multiple times without incident. Ancient Korathi records described it as unremarkable space, dotted with standard stellar formations and several promising worlds suitable for colonization. Then the humans had arrived, and the region had become forbidden territory. Vareth's curiosity deepened into obsession over the following weeks. He spent his rest periods analyzing shipping lane data, looking for patterns in how vessels navigated around human space. What he found was revealing. Commercial traffic gave human territory a wide berth, often adding days or even weeks to journey times rather than requesting passage through human space. Military vessels avoided it entirely. Even the Galactic Council's official courier ships, which typically enjoyed unrestricted travel privileges throughout mapped space, detoured around the human boundary. When Vareth brought his findings to his supervisor, Counselor Vren, he expected interest or at least acknowledgement of the mystery. Instead, he received something he had rarely experienced in his career: dismissal. The humans maintain their sovereignty over their territory, Vren said, his reptilian features impossible to read. The Galactic Council has granted them special dispensation regarding external surveys. This matter is closed, Senior Cartographer. But the inconsistencies in the historical data suggest something beyond simple territorial rights. Vareth pressed. 3 vessels disappeared, 14 crew members lost. The pattern indicates genuine danger, not just political boundaries. Vren's tail twitched, a sign of irritation among his species. The Universal Mapping Consortium exists to serve the galactic community, not to question the decisions of its governing bodies. I suggest you redirect your attention to the Outer Rim surveys. They require your expertise far more than this curiosity. The conversation ended there, but Vareth could not let it go. That evening, he accessed the personnel files of the survivors from the Stellar Chronicler expedition. Most had indeed vanished into obscurity, but one name caught his attention: Mira Seln, a Velocian astrophysicist who had served as the mission's chief scientist. Unlike her crewmates, she had not retreated to some distant colony. Instead, she had taken a position at a remote research station in the Keltar system, studying what the records described as exotic spatial phenomena. Vareth sent her a carefully worded message, identifying himself and expressing academic interest in her research. He did not mention human space directly, but he suspected she would understand the subtext. To his surprise, she responded within hours. If you wish to understand what lies within the gray zones of your maps, her message read, come to Keltar Station. But be warned, senior cartographer, some knowledge cannot be unlearned. Some truths change how you see the universe forever. 3 weeks later, Vareth stood in Mira's laboratory. A cramped space filled with sensor equipment and holographic displays showing gravitational anomalies. The Velocian scientist was smaller than he had expected, her crystalline skin reflecting the light from her instruments in prismatic patterns. But her eyes held a weight that spoke of experiences that had marked her deeply. You want to know what we found in human space, she said without preamble. Everyone who asks that question believes they are prepared for the answer. None of them are. I have spent my entire life cataloging the unknown, Vareth replied. I have documented phenomena that would drive lesser minds to madness. Black holes that sing in frequencies that affect neural tissue, nebulae where time flows backward. I believe I can handle whatever truth you have to share. Mira laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Those are natural phenomena, predictable and explainable within the framework of physics. What exists in human space is something else entirely. She gestured to her displays, and they shifted to show sensor readings that made no logical sense. We detected spatial tiers that should not exist, gravitational patterns that violated every known law, energy signatures that our instruments could not properly classify because they existed partially outside normal spacetime. You are describing impossible things, Vareth said. Yes, Mira agreed. And yet they are real. The humans have weaponized impossibility itself. She told him about the expedition's 6th day in human territory. They had been following what appeared to be a standard survey pattern when their sensors detected an anomaly ahead. Protocol demanded they investigate, document, and avoid if hazardous. What they found was a tear in space itself, a wound in reality approximately 3 kilometers across. Through it they could see something, not another region of space, but something that hurt to observe, that made their instruments scream with conflicting data, that caused 3 crew members to collapse with seizures simply from looking at the sensor feeds. Then the humans had arrived. A fleet of 30 vessels had surrounded the tear, each one bristling with technology that the stellar chronicler's sensors could barely register. The humans had deployed what Mira could only describe as reality anchors, devices that somehow stabilized the fabric of spacetime itself. They had sealed the tear with practiced efficiency, as though such operations were routine. Afterward, a human commander had contacted them. The conversation had been brief and terrifying in its implications. You have witnessed something that most of the galaxy is not ready to understand, the commander had said. We protect these borders not to hide from you, but to protect you from what lies beyond. Return to your people. Tell them that human space is mapped, that it contains nothing of interest, that there is no reason to return. This is the only warning you will receive. 8 crew members had refused to leave. They had demanded answers, threatened to report the incident to the Galactic Council, insisted on their right to complete their survey. The humans had simply nodded and allowed them to proceed deeper into the territory. None of those 8 had ever been seen again. They did not kill them, Mira said quietly. The commander made that clear. They allowed them to witness the truth, and the truth destroyed them. Some knowledge is lethal, Vareth. Some questions have answers that break minds. Vareth absorbed this information, his memory glands working to process and categorize what he had heard. If what you say is true, then human space represents the single greatest mystery in the mapped galaxy. How can the consortium simply ignore this? Because the alternative is worse, Mira replied. Imagine if the galaxy knew that tiers in reality existed, that things from beyond normal space could break through, that humanity alone stood guard against horrors that could unravel existence itself. There would be panic, riots, civilizations would collapse from the existential terror. The Galactic Council knows this. They have made a choice to preserve ignorance for the sake of stability. But you are telling me, Vareth observed. Mira's crystalline features reflected sadness. Because you will not stop searching until you find the truth. I can see it in you, the same obsession that drove me. Better you hear it from someone who has survived the experience than discover it yourself and suffer the fate of those 8 who ventured too deep. Vareth left Keltar Station with more questions than answers, but also with a new resolve. If the humans were protecting the galaxy from something, he needed to understand what and why. More importantly, he needed to know if they were succeeding or if the threat was growing. The blank space on his map suddenly represented not an absence of knowledge, but an active concealment of the greatest danger the galaxy had ever faced. Back at the consortium headquarters, he began quietly assembling a team. He needed specialists who were skilled, curious, and most importantly, willing to risk everything for the truth. He found them in unexpected places. Thane Chorus was a pilot who had flown rescue missions in the most dangerous regions of mapped space. His species, the Drexel, possessed reflexes 3 times faster than most humanoids, making him capable of navigating hazards that would destroy other vessels. When Vareth approached him with a vague description of a dangerous survey mission, Thane had simply asked when they were leaving. Kessex was different. The hulking Graythian had served in the Galactic Defense Force for 20 years before retiring, under circumstances that remained classified. He possessed strength that bordered on the superhuman, and a calm demeanor that suggested he had faced death too many times to fear it. When Vareth explained that they might encounter hostile situations, Kessex had merely nodded and begun checking his equipment. The team was small, just the 4 of them, including Mira, who had insisted on joining despite her previous trauma. "I have lived with questions for 15 years, she told Vareth. "Perhaps it is time I found answers." They requisitioned a small survey vessel, officially documenting their mission as a routine mapping expedition to the Outer Rim. No one at the consortium questioned the request. Vareth had an impeccable record, and small survey missions were common. Within a week, they were ready to depart. The night before the launch, Vareth stood in the observation deck of the consortium headquarters, staring out at the sea of stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of his carefully maintained maps, humanity stood guard against something terrible. Tomorrow, he would cross the boundary they had established and seek the truth that had destroyed minds and ended careers. His memory glands preserved every detail of this moment. The distant glow of the galactic core, the faint hum of the station's life support systems, the weight of decision settling into his bones. Some part of him knew that after tomorrow nothing would be the same. The cartographer who returned from human space, if he returned at all, would be fundamentally different from the one standing here now. But the blank space on the map called to him, and Vareth Cole had never been able to resist the call of the unknown. Their vessel, the Seeker's Promise, departed at dawn cycle, its course set for the boundary of human territorial space. As they left the shipping lanes behind and entered the void between charted systems, Vareth felt the familiar thrill of exploration mixed with something new. Genuine fear. The journey to the human boundary took 12 days. As they approached, Thane reported increasing amounts of interference with their navigation systems. "It is subtle," he said, his Drexel eyes narrowing as he studied his displays. "But something is affecting our quantum positioning array. We are where we should be, but the instruments keep suggesting we are somewhere else." "Spatial distortion," Mira confirmed from her science station. "The same phenomena we encountered last time. It begins at least 3 light years before the official boundary. The humans have created a buffer zone where normal physics becomes unreliable." Kessex checked his weapons, a habit he had maintained throughout the journey. "If we encounter hostiles, conventional tactics may prove ineffective in an environment where space itself is unstable. Our objective is observation, not conflict," Vareth reminded him. "We are here to understand, not to fight." "Understanding may require surviving first," Kessex replied calmly. They crossed the boundary at midday cycle, marked only by a subtle shift in the color of local space. There were no warning buoys, no patrol vessels, nothing to indicate they had entered restricted territory. Yet all of them felt it, a change in the very quality of existence around them, as though they had stepped from one room into another with different air pressure. The instruments immediately began reporting anomalies. Gravitational readings fluctuated without corresponding mass sources. The quantum field showed patterns that should not exist. Most disturbing, their chronometers began showing micro-discrepancies, each one reading a slightly different time despite being synchronized before the crossing. Time is flowing at different rates in different parts of the ship, Mira reported, her voice tight with controlled fear. The variations are small, measured in nanoseconds, but they are real. This should not be possible. Yet it is happening, Verath observed, watching his own chronometer skip forward by 2 seconds before correcting itself. Document everything. Whatever else occurs, we must maintain records. They proceeded deeper into human territory, following a course that Mira had plotted based on her previous expedition's data. The anomalies intensified with each passing hour. Stars seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Space itself appeared to ripple occasionally, as though they were traveling through water rather than vacuum. On the third day, they detected artificial structures, dozens of them scattered throughout the region like sentinels. Each one was approximately 2 kilometers in length, bristling with technology that their sensors could barely analyze. They appeared to be monitoring stations, but what they monitored remained unclear. Those arrays, Mira said, highlighting a section of her display. They are measuring space-time stability. Each one is acting as an anchor, holding reality stable in this region. Without them? She trailed off, unwilling to complete the thought. Without them what? Verath pressed. Without them, this entire region would tear itself apart. Mira finished quietly. The humans are not just defending their territory. They are holding it together. Before Verath could respond, Thane called out from the pilot station. We have company. Multiple contacts approaching fast. 5 human vessels emerged from behind a nearby moon, their approach coordinated and precise. They made no hostile moves, but their intent was clear. The Seeker's promise had been detected, tracked, and intercepted. A communication request came through almost immediately. Verath accepted it, and the main display showed a human male wearing a dark uniform marked with insignia that meant nothing to the galactic visitors. His expression was neutral, but his eyes were sharp, evaluating them with the gaze of someone accustomed to making life-or-death decisions. Unidentified vessel. You have entered restricted space, the human said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. I am Commander Michael Torres of the Earth Territorial Defense Fleet. State your purpose and identity immediately. Verath stepped forward, positioning himself in view of the communication pickup. I am Senior Cartographer Verath Cole of the Universal Mapping Consortium. We are conducting a scientific survey to understand the spatial anomalies present in this region. Something flickered in Torres's eyes. Not surprise, but recognition. The consortium is aware that Earth Territorial space is exempt from standard mapping protocols under Galactic. Council Resolution 7721. You are in violation of treaty law. We are aware of the treaty, Verath acknowledged. We are also aware that mapping vessels have disappeared in this region, that crews have suffered unexplained trauma, and that the largest blank spot in the Galactic database exists here. As cartographers, we seek to understand why. Torres was silent for a long moment, studying them through the communication link. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed, carrying a note of something that might have been respect or perhaps pity. You came here for truth, Torres said. Very few make that choice. Most are content with comfortable ignorance. The question is whether you are prepared for what truth costs in this place. We are prepared, Verath said, though he was no longer certain that was true. Torres nodded slowly. Then follow our escort to Station 17. What you seek to understand cannot be explained through communication alone. You will need to witness it directly. He paused and his expression hardened. But understand this, cartographer. Once you see what we protect, you will carry that knowledge for the rest of your life. Some of your crew may not survive the experience intact. Even now you can turn back and we will allow it. This is the only offer of retreat you will receive. Verath looked at his crew. Thane's expression showed determination. Keswick's appeared calm and ready. Mira's crystalline features reflected fear but also resolve. They had come too far to turn back now. We proceed, Verath said. Then may whatever gods you believe in have mercy on your minds, Torres replied. Follow our lead. Do not deviate from the designated course. In human space, straying from safe paths can be fatal in ways your species has no framework to comprehend. The communication ended, and the human vessels moved into escort formation. As the Seeker's promise followed them deeper into the restricted zone, Vareth noticed that the spatial anomalies were becoming more severe. Reality itself seemed to be straining against some enormous pressure, like ice beginning to crack under weight. Whatever the humans were protecting, whatever truth waited for them at Station 17, Farath knew with certainty that his universe was about to change forever. The blank space on his map was about to be filled with knowledge that could not be unmade, truth that could not be forgotten. The cartographer in him demanded answers. The living being underneath feared what those answers might be. The truth behind the Void Station, 17, hung in space like a monument to human determination, its structure spanning nearly 10 kilometers across. Unlike the elegant architectural designs favored by most galactic civilizations, the station was brutally functional. Every surface bristled with equipment, sensors, and weapon systems that seemed to blur the line between defensive armament and scientific instrumentation. As the Seeker's promise approached under escort, Vareth noticed something that made his memory glands pulse with alarm. The station was not orbiting anything. It simply existed in empty space held in position by forces his sensors could not properly identify. They have anchored it to space-time itself, Mira whispered, her voice filled with awe and horror. Not to a planet or star, but to the fabric of reality. The energy requirements alone should be impossible. Commander Torres's voice came through their communication system. Dock at Bay 7. You will leave all weapons aboard your vessel. Standard biological safety protocols are suspended. Where you are going, conventional hazards are irrelevant. The docking procedure was smooth despite the unsettling readings their instruments continued to provide. As they disembarked, Vareth noticed that the station's interior felt wrong in ways he could not quite articulate. The gravity was standard, the atmosphere breathable, the lighting adequate. Yet something about the space itself felt stretched, as though the physical dimensions did not quite match what his eyes reported. Commander Torres waited for them in the docking bay, accompanied by 4 other humans wearing the same dark uniforms. All of them had a peculiar quality to their eyes, a 1,000-yard stare that Vareth had seen before only in combat veterans who had witnessed atrocities. These were people who had looked into an abyss and somehow retained their sanity, though the cost was evident in every line of their faces. Welcome to Station 17, Torres said without warmth. Before we proceed, I need to establish baseline psychological profiles for each of you. What you are about to witness has effects on cognitive function that vary by species. We need to know your normal state so we can monitor for degradation. You speak as though viewing information can cause physical harm, Vareth observed. Not information, Torres corrected. Reality. Or rather, the absence of it. Please follow Dr. Chen to the medical bay. This will take approximately 1 hour. The psychological evaluation was unlike anything Vareth had experienced. Dr. Chen, a human female with graying hair and gentle eyes that contradicted the intensity of her examination, led them through tests that measured not just mental acuity but something deeper. She showed them images and monitored not just their reactions but the way their neural patterns shifted when processing what they saw. Your species has strong cognitive defense mechanisms, she told Vareth after completing his evaluation. Your memory glands help compartmentalize traumatic information. That may protect you better than most. The Velocian will struggle more. Crystalline neural structures are vulnerable to pattern shock. The Drexel should be fine. Their reflexive psychology treats everything as a potential threat, which ironically provides stability. The Graythian, she paused, studying Kessix's results. He has already encountered something that broke standard reality frameworks. There is scar tissue in his psychological profile. Kessix spoke for the first time since boarding the station. The Krell incursion, 7th moon of Grathus Prime. My unit encountered something that should not have existed. We were told it was classified weapons testing. I have suspected otherwise for years. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. It was a breach. A small one, quickly contained. You survived because your unit retreated before full manifestation occurred. What you will see here is far more extensive. She looked at each of them in turn. I am required to ask one final time, do you wish to proceed? There is no shame in choosing ignorance. Most sentient beings in the galaxy have made that choice. Knowingly or otherwise, we proceed, Vareth said, and his crew nodded agreement. Dr. Chen's expression showed something that might have been respect or possibly sorrow. Then may you find the strength to carry what you are about to learn. Commander Torres led them through the station's corridors, passing dozens of humans moving with purposeful urgency. Everyone they encountered had that same haunted quality to their eyes, and Vareth began to understand that Station 17 was not just a military installation. It was a prison where the guards had sentenced themselves to eternal watch. They entered an observation deck that overlooked a massive chamber at the station's core. What Vareth saw there defied every framework his mind had developed over 43 cycles of scientific observation. Suspended in the center of the chamber, held in place by hundreds of pulsing energy beams, was a tear in reality itself. It was roughly 50 meters across, its edges flickering between existence and non-existence. Through it, Vareth could see something that his brain refused to properly process. Colors that had no names, geometries that violated spatial mathematics, movement in directions that did not exist. Do not look directly at it for more than 10 seconds at a time, Torres warned. Even through the reinforced shielding, prolonged observation causes neural damage. We have lost people who thought they could handle more. Vareth forced his gaze away, his memory glands screaming with the impossibility of cataloging what he had witnessed. What is that? A wound, Torres said simply. A tear between our universe and something else. Something that exists according to different rules, different physics, different fundamental constants. The entity on the other side is trying to push through. We are holding it back. How long has this been here? Mira asked, her crystalline skin flickering with colors that indicated extreme stress. This particular breach appeared 193 years ago, Torres replied. It is one of 17 major wounds we currently maintain. There are also 73 minor breaches and approximately 400 weak points that require constant monitoring. New tiers form regularly. Some we can seal completely. Others, like this one, we can only contain. The magnitude of what Torres was describing crashed over Vareth like a physical force. You are saying human space is riddled with these breaches? That your entire territory is essentially a containment zone? Now you understand why we cannot permit external surveys, Torres said. Imagine if the galaxy knew that reality itself is compromised in this region. Imagine if they understood that things from beyond normal space are constantly attempting to break through. There would be panic that would shatter civilizations. But how did this happen? Thane asked, his Drexel reflexes keeping his eyes moving, never focusing on the breach for too long. What caused these tears? Torres gestured for them to follow him to a briefing room adjacent to the observation deck. Once inside, he activated a holographic display showing the region of space they currently occupied. 230 years ago, humanity developed faster than light travel. Our early exploration was cautious, mapping nearby systems, establishing colonies. Then we discovered something in this region, ancient structures, artifacts left by a civilization that predated the current galactic community by millions of years. The display shifted to show images of massive constructs, their architecture alien even by the diverse standards of the galaxy. We called them the architects. Their technology was so far beyond our understanding that even our best scientists could barely comprehend the most basic functions. But we tried. We studied. We experimented. Torres's expression hardened, and we made a mistake. One of our research teams activated a device without fully understanding its purpose. It was designed to punch through the barriers between universes, to allow travel or communication across dimensional boundaries. Instead, it created a wound that began tearing our reality apart. The tears spread rapidly, he continued. Within months, entire star systems were becoming unstable. The things that began pushing through from the other side. Torres paused, and for the first time, Vareth saw genuine fear in the commander's eyes. They were not malicious. That would have been easier to comprehend. They were simply incompatible with our existence. Their presence degraded reality around them. Stars would flicker out. Planets would phase out of normal space. Ships would encounter pockets where physics stopped working entirely. What did you do? Vareth asked. We fought, Torres said simply. But you cannot fight something that exists partially outside the rules of your universe. Conventional weapons were useless. Energy weapons sometimes made things worse. We lost millions of people before we understood what we were facing. The holographic display shifted again, showing human vessels deploying technology that looked like nothing Vareth had ever encountered. We had to develop entirely new sciences. We learned to manipulate space-time directly, to create anchors that stabilized reality, to build weapons that could seal tears by reinforcing the dimensional barriers. The architects had left tools and we learned to use them through trial and catastrophic error. The war lasted 43 years, Torres continued. By the end, we had pushed back the incursions and sealed most of the major breaches. But we could not repair the damage completely. This entire region of space remains fundamentally compromised. The barriers between universes are thin here, weak. Without constant maintenance and vigilance, they would fail. And everything that exists from here to the galactic core would be consumed by dimensional collapse. Keswick spoke, his deep voice rumbling with the weight of his question. Why not inform the Galactic Council? Request assistance? Surely other civilizations would help protect reality itself. Torres's laugh was bitter. We tried. In the early days, we sent delegations to the Council, explained what we had discovered, requested aid. Do you know what we received? Denial. Disbelief. Accusations that we were fabricating threats to gain territorial concessions. Most species lack the framework to even comprehend what we were describing. Their physics does not account for multiversal boundaries. Their religions do not prepare them for the existence of realms that violate their fundamental understanding of creation. Some believed us, he added quietly, but their response was worse than denial. 3 major civilizations declared that the entire region should be sterilized, destroyed utterly to prevent the spread of dimensional instability. They proposed using singularity weapons to collapse the entire sector into a black hole, killing billions of humans and 3 other species that inhabited this region. Vareth felt his memory glands pulse with horror. The Council would not have approved such genocide. No, Torres agreed. But the fear was real. We realized then that we could not rely on external help. We established our boundaries, negotiated for special territorial status, and took on the burden ourselves. For nearly 2 centuries, humanity has stood guard over these wounds in reality, keeping them contained, preventing knowledge of them from spreading. We have become the galaxy's hidden guardians, protecting trillions of beings who will never know what we sacrifice for their continued existence. Mira's voice was barely a whisper. How many humans are dedicated to this effort? Currently? Approximately 40 million, Torres replied, split between 73 stations like this one, monitoring and containment fleets, research facilities, and rapid response teams. We rotate personnel regularly to prevent psychological breakdown. Even with all our precautions, we lose people, some to accidents when containment fails, others to the gradual erosion of sanity that comes from standing watch over impossibility. An alarm suddenly blared through the station, and Torres's expression shifted to combat readiness. Breach event. Sector 9. Class 4 manifestation. He looked at Vareth and his crew. You wanted to understand what we do here. Now you will witness it firsthand. They followed Torres at a run through the station's corridors, arriving at another observation deck that overlooked a different section of space. Through the reinforced windows, Vareth saw something that made his carefully ordered mind rebel against its own perception. A new tier was forming, reality peeling back like wounded flesh to reveal something underneath that should not exist. Human vessels were already converging on the breach, dozens of them moving with practiced coordination. They deployed in a pattern around the tear, each one extending beams of shimmering energy that connected to form a geometric web. The web pulsed with power that Vareth's instruments registered as impossible readings, energy states that violated thermodynamics, quantum effects that occurred at macro scales. Reality anchors deploying, a technician reported. Dimensional pressure at 87%. Something is pushing through. Through the tear, Vareth caught glimpses of movement. Something vast was attempting to force its way into normal space. Something that his eyes tried to interpret but could not. His memory glands, normally so reliable, refused to record what he was seeing, as though his own biology recognized that this information was too dangerous to preserve. Manifestation imminent, the technician called out. All vessels prepare for active suppression. The human ships fired, but not conventional weapons. Beams of what Torres called coherent spacetime lanced out, striking not the entity itself but the tier around it. The beams wove together, creating a fabric of reinforced reality that began constricting the breach. The thing trying to push through thrashed, and where its movements touched normal space, stars simply ceased to exist. Their light snuffed out as though they had never been. It is fighting back, Mira observed, her voice tight with controlled terror. They always do, Torres said, but we have learned their patterns. Reality is stronger than they are when properly reinforced. Watch. The human vessels intensified their fire, the web of energy growing more complex with each passing second. Slowly, impossibly, the tier began to close. The entity on the other side made one final push, and for a moment, a portion of it entered normal space. Vareth saw the human ships closest to that manifestation simply cease to exist, not destroyed but erased, removed from reality as completely as if they had never been. Casualties confirmed, the technician reported. Emotion carefully suppressed. Vessels 17, 23, and 41 are gone. 214 personnel. Torres's jaw clenched, but he did not look away from the display. Continue suppression. Seal that breach. The remaining vessels redoubled their efforts, and the tier contracted further. The entity withdrew, or perhaps was pushed back, and with a final pulse of reality-defying energy, the breach sealed completely. Space returned to normal, though the stars that had been extinguished did not return. They were simply gone, erased from existence as though they had never burned. Silence filled the observation deck. Torres finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of uncounted losses. That was a relatively minor breach. Class 4. We handle 3 to 5 of those per week. Class 5 events, where the manifestation fully enters our space, happen monthly. Those cost us more. And you have been doing this for 2 centuries? Varath asked, his voice barely functioning. Every day, Torres confirmed. Every hour. Human space is not a territory, cartographer. It is a battlefield where we fight a war that the rest of the galaxy does not know exists. Our children are born here, grow up here, take their place on the walls here. We have built our entire civilization around this duty because someone must stand guard, and no one else can. Keswick stepped forward, his massive frame somehow diminished by what he had witnessed. The personnel who were lost, their families will be notified? They have no families outside the containment service, Torres said quietly. We learn early not to form attachments with those who live in normal space. The psychological strain of protecting people who do not know you exist, who cannot comprehend your sacrifice, is too great. We have become a separate society, existing parallel to the rest of humanity, bound together by shared duty and shared trauma. Varath's mind raced, trying to process the implications of everything he had learned. The Galactic Council knows this is happening. They understand that you are fighting to preserve reality itself. The Council knows we maintain territorial sovereignty for security reasons, Torres replied. A handful of individuals know the truth. They have agreed to keep it secret, to maintain the comfortable lies that allow the galaxy to function. And they provide us with resources quietly, through channels that cannot be traced. It is an arrangement built on mutual need and mutual deception. But the people deserve to know, Thane protested. They should understand what is being done to protect them. Torres turned to face him directly. Do they? Tell me, pilot. What would you do if I announced to the entire galaxy that reality itself is compromised, that tiers between universes are constantly forming, that entities beyond comprehension are trying to break through and consume everything? How would your people react? How would any people react? Thane fell silent, unable to answer. Mass panic, Torres continued. Religious upheaval. Civilizations collapsing from existential terror. Species turning on each other, seeking someone to blame. The Galactic Council would fracture. Wars would erupt over who should control or destroy human space. And in the chaos, who would maintain the containment? Who would stand watch over the breaches while the galaxy tore itself apart in fear? So you bear this burden in silence, Varath said, understanding settling over him like a heavy shroud. We bear it because we must, Torres replied. Because we caused it initially through our hubris and ignorance. And because we are, through circumstance and hard-earned expertise, the only ones capable of maintaining the containment. This is humanity's penance and our purpose. We broke reality. We will hold it together, for as long as we can, whether the galaxy knows it or not. Dr. Chen entered the observation deck carrying data tablets. Commander, the psychological evaluations are showing expected strain. The Velocian is approaching critical stress levels. I recommend they return to their vessel within the next 2 hours. Torres nodded. Cartographer Vareth, you have seen what you came to see. You understand now why your maps must remain empty in this region. Not because we hide weakness, but because we hide a truth that would destroy more than it would save. Vareth looked at his crew. Mira's crystalline skin had lost its usual luster, dulled by the weight of what she had witnessed. Thane's reflexive alertness had been replaced by a haunted stillness. Keswick simply stared out at the space where the breach had been, his expression unreadable. They had all been changed by this knowledge, marked by it in ways that would never fully heal. "What happens now?" Verath asked. "You have shown us everything, given us knowledge that the galaxy has conspired to hide. What do you expect us to do with it?" Torres met his gaze steadily. "That is your choice to make. We will not stop you from sharing what you have learned. We cannot force your silence, but I ask you to consider carefully what that knowledge would cost. Not to us, we have already paid every price this duty demands. To the people you would be informing, to the stability of civilizations that function only because they believe reality is stable and comprehensible." He paused, then continued. "The Galactic Council has procedures in place for if this information becomes public. Emergency protocols that would attempt to manage the panic, contain the fallout. But simulations suggest that such disclosure would result in the deaths of billions, the collapse of interstellar trade networks, and potentially the unraveling of the galactic community itself. All to reveal a truth that changes nothing about the fundamental situation. The breaches exist, we contain them, and life continues." Verath understood the impossible position Torres was placing him in. Return with the truth and potentially destroy the stability of galactic civilization. Return with silence and become complicit in the greatest deception in recorded history. The cartographer in him rebelled against the idea of deliberately falsifying records, of leaving the map blank when he now possessed the knowledge to fill it. But the living being who had watched 214 humans die in seconds to seal a single breach understood why some truths needed protection. "We need time," Verath said finally. "Time to process what we have learned. Time to consider the implications." "Take what time you need," Torres replied. "But understand that the longer you remain here, the more deeply this knowledge will embed itself in your minds. Dr. Chen can attempt memory suppression if you choose, though it is imperfect at best." "No," Verath said firmly, and his crew nodded agreement. "If we are to carry this burden, we will carry it fully. We will not hide from what we have chosen to learn." Torres inclined his head in respect. "Then I will arrange for quarters on the station. You will remain our guests while you decide what to do with the truth you have discovered. In the meantime, perhaps you would like to meet some of the others who stand watch here, to understand not just what we do, but who we are." Over the following days, Verath and his crew lived among the humans of Station 17. They met engineers who had spent 30 years maintaining the reality anchors, never seeing their families on distant Earth. They spoke with soldiers who had watched friends erased from existence by manifestation events. They shared meals with scientists who studied phenomena that could never be published, whose discoveries would never be celebrated beyond the confines of the containment service. What struck Verath most was not the horror of what these humans faced, but the quiet dignity with which they faced it. There were no grand heroics, no dramatic pronouncements, just people doing an impossible job because someone had to, finding meaning in duty and purpose in protection. They told jokes, fell in love, argued about trivial matters, celebrated small victories. They had built a life in the shadow of apocalypse, and in doing so, had become something extraordinary. On the 7th day, Verath made his decision. He stood in Station 17's communication center, preparing to transmit his final report to the Universal Mapping Consortium. His crew stood with him, their agreement already given. They had discussed this choice endlessly, examining it from every angle their diverse perspectives could provide. In the end, the decision had been unanimous. Counselor Vren, Verath began his recording. "This is Senior Cartographer Verath Cole, transmitting my final report on the survey of human territorial space. After extensive evaluation, I can confirm that the region is accurately mapped. Our sensors detected standard stellar formations, several promising worlds, and no significant anomalies. There is no scientific reason to dispute humanity's territorial sovereignty or require external survey access. I recommend that human space remain classified as adequately documented and that no further survey missions be assigned to this sector." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I am also submitting my resignation from the Universal Mapping Consortium, effective immediately. Personal reasons. I thank you for 43 cycles of service and the opportunity to contribute to the expansion of galactic knowledge." The recording ended, and Verath looked at Commander Torres, who had been watching from the doorway. There is your silence, purchased at the cost of my career and my purpose. What will you do now? Torres asked. Varath glanced at his crew. They had already discussed this as well. We will return to our peoples and live our lives carrying this knowledge in silence. We will find new purposes, new meanings, but we will remember what we saw here, and we will honor it through our silence. You could stay, Torres offered. The containment service can always use skilled personnel, especially those who already carry the burden of knowledge. For a moment, Varath was tempted. To join these guardians, to contribute to their impossible duty, held a certain appeal, but he recognized that his role was different. No, he said finally. You need people who can return to normal space, who can move through the galaxy and watch for signs that this knowledge is spreading or that new breaches are forming outside your territory. You need witnesses who remain in the wider world, keeping faith with your sacrifice even if we can never speak of it. Torres nodded slowly. Then go with our gratitude, cartographer. You have made the harder choice. Serving here would be simpler than carrying this secret back into a galaxy that does not want to know it exists. The Seeker's Promise departed Station 17 the following morning. As they crossed back through the boundary of human space, Vareth stood at the observation window, watching the spatial anomalies fade into normal space-time. Behind them, humanity stood its eternal watch, fighting a war in silence, holding reality together through sheer determination. The blank space on his maps would remain blank. The truth would remain hidden, and somewhere in the archives of the Universal Mapping Consortium, Vareth's report would gather data dust. One more confirmation that human space contained nothing of interest, nothing worth investigating. But Vareth would remember. On quiet nights when he looked up at the stars, he would think of Commander Torres and Dr. Chen and the 214 personnel who had died in seconds to seal a single breach. He would think of the 40 million humans who had dedicated their entire civilization to protecting a galaxy that would never thank them because it would never know. Some truths were too terrible to share. Some knowledge could only be carried by those strong enough to bear it in silence. The greatest heroes were those whose deeds would never be celebrated, whose sacrifices would never be recorded, whose wars would never be remembered. In the empty space on his maps, Vareth saw not an absence of knowledge but a monument to the most profound form of service, protection given freely, without expectation of recognition or reward. Humanity had broken reality through hubris, and now they mended it through humility, asking nothing in return except that the galaxy remain ignorant of both their crime and their redemption. The cartographer had sought truth and found it. Now he would spend the rest of his life honoring that truth through silence, keeping faith with the guardians who stood watch in the darkness, ensuring that the galaxy could sleep peacefully. Never knowing what nightmares they held at bay, the map would remain empty. And in that emptiness, Vareth had found the most important knowledge of all. Some questions should never be answered, some mysteries should never be solved, and some heroes should never be named. For in the silence they found their strength, and in the darkness they kept the light burning.